Hi, my name's Ros and I work for the University of Exeter. I work on a project with Cornwall Council called Making Space for Nature. And this project involves improving parks and green areas in towns for wildlife and for people. And as part of this, we've been planting loads of wildflowers. So today I really want to tell you about wildflowers, how exciting they are, the things that they do for us, the things that we can do for them, and also to show you some activities that you can do with wildflowers. So what is a wildflower? So is it the same as a weed? Basically, a weed is something that is growing in a place that people don't want it to. Wildflowers are flowers that you find naturally out in the countryside, not growing in garden centres, and you can see them everywhere. And quite often they have these really pretty flowers, which you can see here. Wildflowers, they basically do everything that people do, but they just do it while they're in one place. So in the life cycle of a wildflower, the wildflower needs to produce seed, which then drops down to produce a new wildflower. So if you look at them really carefully, what you can see are there are different male and female parts of the flower. And wildflowers need for the pollen to go from the male parts to the female parts. And for some wildflowers, the male parts and the female parts are on the same flower, which you can see in these buttercups. But for others, they're on different flowers, and in some cases they're on different plants entirely, a bit like people. So you have male and female plants. So the question for wildflowers is how do they get their pollen to move? And these ones with these really pretty flowers, they tend to use insects to do that. So the insect will take the pollen from the male part of the flower to the female part, in a process called pollination. And the wildflower will quite often reward them, either by letting them eat the pollen or by giving them some nectar to drink. And nectar's a bit like sugary water, so it's basically a bit like us having a Coca-Cola or something. Next time you're out in your local park, you could take some pencils and some paper and maybe draw some of the wildflowers that you see. So I've chosen to draw this bluebell because I think they're really beautiful. And when you're looking at the different parts of the flower, that can really help you work out what the wildflower is. So I've drawn the blue petals here, but then when you look inside you can see that there's these white stamens which has got the white pollen on for the bluebells. And these arrangements of the petals and also the leaves tell you what kind of wildflower it is. So for example, this bluebell, I know that this is one of our English native bluebells because it has that white pollen. And also if you look at the flowers, they kind of droop over to one side. Whereas if it was the Spanish bluebell, that has violet coloured pollen and is much more straight up than this one. So drawing wildflowers can really help you appreciate them, but also work out what they are. Or if you wanted to go completely abstract, you could. So if you want to help wildflowers, it's quite easy. All they need is sunshine, soil and a bit of water. So wildflowers actually do better when the soil has really low levels of plant food. So that's nutrients, things like nitrogen that you would find in a fertiliser. Now if there's too much plant food, then the wildflowers will be outcompeted by grasses. So it's better to have really poor soil for wildflowers, which seems a bit wrong really, but there you go. But if you want to grow your own wildflowers, the easiest thing you can do is, if you have a bit of garden, is to let it grow long and see what comes up. But otherwise, you can plant your own, and you can do this even if you only have a windowsill or a balcony or something like that. So I'm going to show you how to plant some wildflower seeds, and it's really easy. You just need some kind of container. I'm using an old yogurt pot here, and I've put some holes in the bottom of it for the water to drain out so it doesn't get too waterlogged. And if you keep the lid, you can use it as a nice saucer to stop it getting water all over your windowsill. So I've just filled up my wildflower pot with soil, and it's just any old soil really. It just has to be quite fine in texture like this. If you happen to find a molehill, molehills create really good soil for planting seeds in, so they've already done the work of churning it up for you. You can then get some wildflower seeds. So you can get wildflower seeds lots of places. You can get them in supermarkets or garden centres. And the thing is, you only need a really tiny amount for a pot this size. So you just sprinkle your wildflower seeds on the top of the pot, and then you really gently cover them over, and that's it. Just keep them moist for the first few weeks, and then once they've started to grow, you just water them about every week or every other week and watch them grow. And if they get big, you could potentially plant them out in your garden or maybe in your school grounds if they would let you. So if you're going to buy wildflower seeds, the best time to plant them is the spring. But what can be really fun is to collect your own wildflower seed and try growing that. So that you have to do at a completely different time of year. So most wildflowers set their seeds in August and September. So this is a bit early, but you can see that these bluebells are starting to produce some seeds. And what you can do is do exactly the same as I showed you with the yoghurt pot, but with some seed that you collected in the wild. But you have to be really careful about a few things. Firstly, if you are going to collect wildflower seed, you have to ask the person who the land belongs to. So if you have a neighbour with a lovely wildflower garden, you could ask them. If there's some wildflower patches in your school, they'd be really good people to ask as well. The other thing to be really careful about is you don't want to take all of it, because the wildflowers need to reproduce themselves. So if you just take a little small amount for yourself, that's fine. So if you've planted a wildflower patch and you want to know how you're doing, there's a really great thing you can do in May called Every Wildflower Counts. And the idea is it's run by a charity called Plant Life, and you basically count the number of wildflowers that you can see. So you start with a metre square quadrat and you find a place to count your wildflowers at random. I'm going to be really careful not to trample the wildflowers while I count them. But here, in my metre of wildflower patch, you can see that I've got loads of red campion, loads of creeping buttercup. So as you can see, this has got quite a lot in. So I can count 27 red campion flowers and 16 creeping buttercup. So that's a really good quadrat. Oh, and I've just spotted there's a little black medic down there as well. My next quadrat is going to be in this low mow area. So this is really cool. You can see we've got some slightly different flower species here. We've got 12 daisies, about 25 red clovers, and red clover is really good for bumblebees because you need a long tongue to get in these flowers, which is what bumblebees have. And then we've also got a few more of the black medics. So that's still a really good wildflower patch. And the last one I was going to do was in the really heavily mown area. So I'll try and get one at random in there. I'll make sure it's actually in my mown grass. And as you can see, when we have a really heavily mown area of grassland, there's just no wildflowers. So that means no resources for the bees, no seeds later on in the season for the birds, and not much for us to draw and paint either. So wildflowers can be really important in the environment. So as I mentioned earlier, they provide pollen and nectar, which insects they use either to feed themselves, like hoverflies, or things like bumblebees and honeybees, they use pollen to feed their young. So when you let wildflowers grow long, like these ones we can see over here, they provide loads of resources for invertebrates, not just pollinators, but things like slugs, snails, spiders, other insects. And scientists like me have shown that by letting wildflowers grow long, like you can see here, that supports 75% more invertebrates over the winter. And you see that's quite different to what you can see in this very highly mown bit, which won't support anywhere near as many. So I really hope you've enjoyed listening to me talk about wildflowers. There's lots of things you can do as well as painting wildflowers that you find. If you go online, we've got some links at the end of this talk, and you can take out a wildflower spotter sheet. Every month you can go out and try and spot wildflowers in your local park. You could also do some of the drawing and painting that we suggested. And if you want to know what wildflowers are, we're also going to put some links to some ID guides, which you might have to get an adult to help you with. But apart from that, thank you for listening, and hopefully you'll be able to grow some wildflowers of your own, or at least let some grass grow a bit longer. bye.